excited to introduce everyone to one of our newest team members and a friend of HGA for a long time, as a matter of fact. We worked with Matt Ashley for a number of years, and we have the good fortune of having him on the HGA team now. He's our Director of Fundraising Partnerships, Matt Ashley, coming in from Montana.
Everybody give Matt a hand.
Yeah, really, really cool, brother. Thanks so much for coming. As mentioned, super, super fortunate to have Matt join the team because he's a wealth of knowledge, because he's done what you all do. He is literally done events start to finish, committees, boards, members, donors, and volunteers. So an expert in the volunteer space about how to motivate volunteers and how to encourage them and how to have difficult conversations. We're going to talk about everything. Episode 107 of the HGA free webinar series is going to be about, volunteers. And I think that if you're watching this live or going to be viewing this as a recording, it's going to have impact with your event and your organization, because we all know we need volunteers, and they're important to everything that we do. And we're going to find the right place to put them. You know what I mean? And once again, to nudge them in the right way. So Matt, thanks a ton for coming, brother. Really appreciate you.
Hey, before we get one more thing, just make sure you stay to the end and win. We will give away a trip that you'll be able to use to raise more money at your next event. Chat is down below. Q&A is down below.
Yep,
if you're watching this on the recording or on YouTube, leave us a comment down there. If you got a question or something you hear and you think it's good, you disagree with, you think is something, we want to hear all that. That's something real important to us. And we'll make sure that you have a way to contact Matt if you have any more questions after this or for us.
Yeah. We're going to have some cool stuff in writing. Matt shared a document. We'll let Matt talk in a second. Just give me 5 more minutes.
Yeah.
But no, we've got some really cool stuff for you to take home when we send out the recording as well that Matt put together. That'll be a nice guideline, but we're going to go over that verbally. And then, as Jason mentioned, let's just keep the conversation going, because we have Matt here with us for the better part of an hour. And any questions or comments or concerns about what you're facing with your volunteers, let us know. So
I'm going to start off. So Matt, we're telling everybody. So tell everybody what, for the 8 years. Well, Matt worked for a large organization, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, for 8 years, right? And then he went to another organization for a year, and then he wanted to get back in fundraising, and so he connected with us, and we were really jumped at the chance to get him on the team. Mm-hmm. So, but while you were at RMEF, that was kind of the majority of stuff that you were doing, was working with volunteers, right, Matt?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I worked with around 300 volunteers, throughout the year, and we hosted, between 17 and 20 fundraising events throughout the year. So, quite a bit of experience, I guess, working with volunteers and those fundraising events. And yeah, I certainly enjoyed the opportunity and love working with volunteers, and especially, putting your thoughts and efforts and getting the most out of volunteers for a mission, and a mission that makes a difference. So.
And just to give you guys an idea how effective he was the #1 fundraiser out of, I don't know, how many RDs are there probably in RMEF?
The mid 30s, I think.
So they got about 35 or so. So he was the top guy by far. Yeah. Still has a great relationship with him, and but it's working with 300 volunteers. It's kind of like herding cats.
That's a big team, man.
That's a lot of folks, but you've really distilled it down to the strategy that you've got. So, let's just kick it right off and get in there. So why don't you just start talking to us about the things that you did, working with your volunteers to make sure, because one thing I think that it's, before we do this, we are going to let you talk, Matt.
Oh, good.
But awesome. I think sometimes we, this volunteer, it's, what is it? And the thing that I sometimes have struggled in my own, over fundraising career and stuff, is making other folks understand how valuable this time is that they're giving. It's one thing when somebody gives you money, but it's another thing when they give you time. Most valuable asset we have is time.
Yep.
And some people may not have a lot of money, and they give you time.
I love that.
And it's an asset, a donation, if you would, that's got to be treated the same way. And then some people are just passionate. They write you big checks and they volunteer. Yep. There's a whole other set of things that go with that. But okay, without any further ado, so Matt goes through the 7 strategies that you implemented to be successful.
You bet. No, appreciate it, Jason and Trevor. No, excited to be here and happy to run through these. And like you both shared, volunteers, when your organization relies on volunteers, like you said, Jason, their time is so valuable. to them and to your organization. You just want to make sure you're maximizing that. So I put together these 7 strategies. I think I have one more to tag on here as a bonus one at the end. But
Cool.
first and foremost is provide clear expectations for what your volunteers, what you expect of them, and what their responsibilities and roles are for your organization. I think that's critical with new volunteers. They know what they're getting into. Existing volunteers as well. If you're a new leader within that organization, then you're on the same page and you know what each other's roles are. And then if they're meeting those roles, you can give them some applause and compliment them. What they're falling short, you guys had a great conversation last week about volunteer board members in not meeting expectations. And if you have those roles outlined on the front end of working with volunteers, you can set those strategies and it'll really help you accomplish more for your mission in the end. I had found job descriptions or it's a delicate balance of job descriptions or task lists. You want to be clear in what the roles are, but you don't want to intimidate someone of what you want them to accomplish as well. So but be clear and forthright of what you want them to do. I found, like I said, job descriptions really helped kind of outline that, and you can put it down on paper. Someone can take it home and digest it, or electronic by email. I always thought those were a good thing to provide to volunteers.
Love it.
Yeah. The next thing I had down, I'll run through these, and I have kind of some tips and topics that kind of fall under these 7 categories that I'll throw out, and you guys can tell me if you agree or
yeah. Well, I'm just expanding on what you just said. The first point, we're big believers in setting boundaries. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to use it as like a psychoanalytical term or a negative. It's just the truth. Expectations, set them early and often. We know the best fundraisers do that. And I think that's huge, man. That's hit it out of the park right away. It's good.
Awesome. Next one I had kind of under this topic of clear expectations is set a goal for what you're trying to accomplish with your committee. That's achievable, and know how to convey to your volunteers or communicate, what is that, hitting that goal or getting close to that goal or exceeding that goal, what does that do for your mission? And being able to communicate that to them and them be able to communicate that to, potential supporters, it really creates a tangible, something tangible that they can shoot for and know what they're accomplishing with their time and all their efforts for your organization. I think that's a good tip under that category. Last one I had down, we did a lot of in-person events. And one thing I always shared before every in-person event, and sometimes I'd share it to kick a year off, is your volunteers are representing your organization. And sometimes they are the face of the organization within the field, for your organization. If they're communicating with a potential donor or supporter, that donor or supporter sees them as the organization. So I kind of put that ownership on the volunteers. Man, you're representing the organization. This is bigger than you. People see you as the organization. So please represent us accordingly. Be as professional as possible. Always be upbeat and positive and respectful to potential donors or our supporters that see you as wearing that logo for the organization. And you are, although you're not just a volunteer, you're a volunteer for the organization. You are the guy to them for the organization. So you don't want to taint, a nonprofit's reputation because you're having a bad day, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's important.
Very true.
Awesome.
I've got one question just within this, when you're talking about goals, did you supply benchmarks? Like, would you say, hey, look, our goal is to, and I'm making this, the numbers I'm just making up. Our goal is to raise, $50,000. By this point, we should have $25,000 in sponsorships. By this time, we should have 35 a total. And then if we do these 4 things, we'll make up the rest of it at our live event, at the actual event. I mean, did you do something like that, Matt? Do you recommend that that's something that you give people those ideas so they know where they understand if they're being successful or not?
Most definitely. We tried to do that and look at, we were, that organization that I worked for had been around for a lot of years. So we'd look at the previous year, past years, and where we were successful and where were the big opportunities we could make up. And we'd have goals in each of those categories. That's a great point. And focusing on, it's kind of the 80-20 rule in some of those categories, like knowing what's going to, give the most output for your volunteers' efforts, right, and really drilling down on some of that stuff, because I mean, you can keep volunteers, endlessly busy with tasks that, maybe don't move the needle for your organization. So
Yeah.
it's a great point, Jason. I think, setting some of those goals early and knowing what moves the needle and kind of channeling volunteer efforts, we definitely did that, and it's something to consider and try to focus on.
I just this thought just came to me. I just was like, if you don't give volunteers goals and expectations and tell them what they need to do, they'll make their own up.
Yeah.
They'll,
Yeah.
if you don't give them, if you don't give your agenda to them of what they need to do, they will have their own agenda, and they'll find stuff to do. And sometimes they're going to do that anyway. So,
No doubt.
I'm sure we'll talk about that here in a minute. And again, if you guys have any questions or comments about this on this, tell us. We want to answer that, because probably somebody else is thinking that. So why don't you what's the, I know the next part's talking about being organized. Go through that with us, what you would do, Matt, as far as how to organize and keep all this stuff on the tracks.
Yeah, time is a volunteer's most valuable asset, and just keeping, one of the things that I found, it sounds simple, but keeping meetings on task is extremely important. And a lot of times it seems like your best volunteers, the kind of 10Xer volunteers that have, are super high performers, they're probably involved in other volunteer activities or other things in their life because they're very good, and just those high achievers, they don't have time or the patience sometimes to, go through a long drawn out meeting or something that's not organized and not accomplishing a lot in a valuable use of their time. So I'm a big believer in very well put together agendas and minutes, and agendas sent out before a meeting so people can kind of digest, consume, make comments if there's something that's not included that they'd like included in the meeting, and then kind of sticking to that agenda and keeping the side, conversations and whatnot, or bringing them up in maybe the next meeting, or addressing, small things after the meeting. And then post meeting, sending out having someone keep minutes during your meeting event, and sending out those minutes afterward. And
Yeah. I'm sorry, you said something. I think this might be really beneficial, because I've had somebody do this with me and some education stuff that I did, and I adopted it, about no sidebar conversations especially when you're trying to get that going and you've got a group of people, to say, hey, everybody, and just telling them, did you do something like that? To say, hey, everybody, we've got this agenda. We're going to go through all these items. We're going to hit all these things. Please, no sidebar conversations. We want to keep it one conversation with everybody, because we want to have a chance for everybody to hear. Because if you guys are talking about something on the side and we don't hear, it might be something that's pertinent to what we're trying to do.
Keep the time too.
And
exactly. Yeah. We did that to the best of our abilities. And that's part of, kind of, if you can get into that rhythm and sending out that agenda prior to the meeting, and encouraging people to, address you or your chair, maybe, hey, I'd love to discuss this topic, and get it on the agenda. That way it can kind of just, keep that momentum within the agenda, because everyone, everyone's there, and probably like-minded people if they're supporting your organization. So they could be side topics that are pertinent to what you're trying to accomplish as your mission, or they're talking, about, what they're going to do together because they're friends on Saturday. So if you can keep it kind of channeled to, to business and what's on topic, I just think it's a lot more efficient system, and you create more time and opportunity. We'll talk about this in a little bit, for kind of that socializing aspect, later on in the time you have allotted to get together.
Awesome.
That's good.
Yeah. The last thing I had here, kind of under be well organized. I saw this a lot. Sometimes, like I talk about these, really high performing volunteers, sometimes, they really are the person within your committee that can do the best job at a lot of different roles. And sometimes those individuals take on too much, and that can be a really big detriment to the future of your committee, for one, and kind of to the morale of your committee. If that one person is holding too many roles, people don't feel empowered and that they're contributing. And you really want to disperse that workload amongst your committee. And if maybe the next person does 80 or 90% of the job of what your leader, or whoever had that role, they have the time to focus on other things. So just be really careful about people taking on too many roles, and make sure those are dispersed amongst the committee. Kind of have your roles and your volunteer roles outlined, I guess, early. I think I found is
How did
helps
you
you overall.
how did you handle that, Matt, when you had somebody that was maybe a high, big personality, driver, getting stuff done, but they would just kind of take on more and wouldn't pass it off? How did you deal with that?
It's probably, best addressed in a one-on-one conversation with that person and just kind of
Mhm.
sharing what I shared with you, explaining, man, you are so valuable for the organization, but you're taking on so many of these tasks that it depends on the role and what it is and whatnot. But a lot of times it seemed like those were your leader type personalities where you really needed them to, put their arms around the full committee and drive and organize subcommittees and smaller groups. And they would take on roles that kind of get them off in the weeds.
Yeah.
And they couldn't step back and see the bigger picture of what, the whole committee was doing. So it's kind of that conversation, just explaining, man, we could really, we value you as a leader and we could accomplish more if you trained, someone else, this person up, that's a great fit, to take on this role. And in the long run, we'll be able to, you'll be able to focus on, things that move the needle more, and not be doing these smaller tasks, I guess, that someone else could help with.
That all comes with communication. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
Yep. Good.
Awesome. That's what I had kind of for being well organized. The next one I had was offer flexibility. And the volunteer role, everything's so busy these days and people get involved in so many different things. There's kind of a balance of being, it has to make sense for your organization. You don't want someone to be, volunteering, but not contributing anything. But being able to be flexible allows you to keep some of those great people that contribute wherever they can, and maybe it's offering time on the weekends or during the evenings, or even remote volunteering opportunities. We had a gentleman that wanted to be involved, young guy, hard worker, but he worked overseas in his career and couldn't be around. He was gone a month at a time. But we got him kind of set up as a remote. He was reaching out to some high profile donors. I got him kind of set up with a system and a pitch to reach out to those individuals. And I don't know if he made hardly a committee meeting that year, leading up to kind of their fundraising event, but I would argue that he made a bigger impact financially for that group than anyone else in the committee. So it's kind of just finding those roles and making sure people are empowered and can make a difference with how they can in their personal lives and careers as well.
Sounds like management 101, man. We're just putting folks in a position to succeed. You know what I mean?
No doubt. Yeah.
It's just good aha stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, your point, that's the thing, Trevor. I think that's where we think because they're volunteers, we can't manage them, that we can't give them leadership and guidance. And what happens, you have the herd trying to lead, and there's nobody. And so they just kind of wander around. And I've dealt with, and have witnessed a lot of frustrated fundraising professional staff trying to, get their volunteers to get in the right place. And it could be a committee, for a fundraising committee. It could be for some activity that they're doing. And it's like, no, that's your job. You're the one that's supposed to set this agenda. And these are things that you do, but somebody still has to be the one to do it. You have to say, this is what we're going to do. And most of the time, in my experience, I don't know how you saw this, Matt, everybody kind of lined right up. Once you kind of said, okay, this is where we're going.
Yeah.
This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. And this is when we're going to get it done by. And they go, okay, let's go. Down the road they go.
It sounds so simple because I just said like management 101. It's like, we're talking about this constantly with folks. We're coaching folks about this. We're podcasting about it. We just dropped one today, as a matter of fact, that was really, really relevant, where it just talked about having a plan. And I think that we just, like you said, it's everyone's kind of going all different directions and the herd's moving this way and who knows who's leading and yada, yada, yada. But clear-cut definitions. You already mentioned something about goals. Fantastic. These are our jobs. And then you have flexibility, of course, because you want to put people in the right position to succeed and you know how they're going to be most impactful and they have their own lives, but they all care. But it's never too late to have a plan. It's also never too early, right? So we're talking to folks that are like planning events out 12 months from now. Have a plan. This is what we're doing. This is the guideline. You can articulate that early as opposed to leaving it to chance. It just sounds so simple. Obviously, it's a little bit of work up front. So impactful for the entire journey. You know what I mean? That's the impression I get.
Oh, spot on. The last thing I had kind of tag on to this same topic of offering flexibility is sometimes things come up in people's lives, personal or career lives, where, man, they don't have the time that they've been able to commit to you, leading up to that point. And they need to take a step back. And there's a couple options you can do there is kind of offer them a lesser role, like we talked about earlier, be flexible and allow them to kind of stay engaged and know what's going on, but take on a much lesser role within your organization. And if that's just not an option, I encourage you to, just be really supportive of that person. Hey, we're here for you. We love, you're such a valuable asset to the organization, and we're here for you when you're ready to come back. And if you really, if it's with us or not without us, or not with us, you kind of draw the line in the sand, and it makes it a little bit harder for that person to come back and re-engage. And I've seen people step away with young, children and needing to focus on their sports and whatnot. And they get through that, and pretty soon, bam, they're back with you, and they're firing on all cylinders and working hard for your mission.
I think it's important. It's a good point.
Awesome.
Yeah.
The next one I had down here was offer training and development. I was a big believer in this, and just, educating your volunteers to, one, improve their skills, and two, improve their confidence, so they can do more and just be more confident in what they're getting done for your organization. These could be done. We did it in workshops and webinars, did a lot of one-on-ones, like I mentioned earlier, just making myself available to volunteers when they were available. A lot of people have careers, so you kind of, be flexible with that. I was just a big believer in giving them the tools to be successful, and anything you can pass to them, and it'll come back tenfold for you in the long run.
Does anybody have a question about this? I think this is something that, when we start talking about training and what that means and how that looks, because sometimes I think we think of a real formalized program, and it could be.
Yeah.
Like there's an organization, and I know somebody here is on today listening from that organization, and they had at one of their committee meetings, and they brought somebody in. It was actually me they brought in. So we went through, that's why I know they did it. We went through a communication training, how to communicate and how to, just to really go through that. And I don't think one person was upset about it. I don't think anybody thought it was a waste of time, and they raised more money. Because it helped them do those things they were uncomfortable doing. Like, and you didn't need to have somebody come in, but in this case they did. But things like getting your committee when you first start, say, hey guys, we're going to go out here and raise for money. So let's just go, we're going to go through and spend a little time and talk about how we're going to do this, how you're going to make an ask, what your pitch is going to be. How do you know what our mission really is? Do you know how to communicate that? It's amazing how many times that they don't know. And a lot of times you don't know what you don't know. And so when you don't have that confidence of the training going to execute, you're just not going to be able to get it done as well. And, reluctance, and that's when, caller reluctance comes in, and they have all these contacts, they know all these people, but they're not calling anybody, but they just need this education. So I think when you say, I hear you say that, I think those are things that it takes time, it takes effort, it's hard. It's probably spent quite a bit of time doing this, didn't you, Matt?
We did. Yeah. A lot of time with this. And it wasn't just me, I guess, thinking about this. It's a good tag on to the conversation we had earlier about kind of spreading that, workload of the committee and not letting the roles fall on one person. We were big believers in kind of too deep leadership, where you had, someone helping someone else in subcommittees or chairs.
Love that.
And your volunteers are training each other on those roles. So at any time, and this is not easy, because sometimes getting volunteers is not the easiest to have that deep of leadership. But if someone has to step out, all that information is not lost. It's carried forward within your volunteers, because there's a lot of information that's acquired over time within your groups.
Institutional knowledge is big.
Love that.
Yeah. So we were big believers in too deep leadership and trying to get people in place, and who's the next person that you're training to take over your position in the future. So I think that's a great tip. It's not easy, but
does training and development, do you ever get to a point where you don't have to do training and development?
No, I think that's just ever it never stops. Yeah, and there's always more to do, and not enough time. So that's
Trevor and I spend an inordinate amount of time talking about this because as our organization has grown significantly over the last couple of years, we have to spend more and more time with our folks doing that, and it's just, you know, we have that it's just and it's not that we don't want to do it. I don't say that. It's that you just, the more you do it, the more you understand the value of it and how important that time is and how important investing it is. And I think a lot of times as professional fundraisers in the world of that, you know, most of the folks of you are, you kind of get stuck in a point where you're like, how do I get my time balance working? How do I do all that? Do you have maybe some tips for that? Does anybody do a raise of hand if you've ever had?
Yeah, thanks for sharing.
We're talking about this and you're thinking right now, how in the world am I going to get, well, I don't have any time now. How do I make that happen?
I want to piggyback on that though, too. It's just like,
anybody else besides me?
Yeah, for sure. I feel this way.
We got a couple of honest people.
What I was thinking when you brought that up, when both of you brought that up, was, you know, we're just learning at such a rapid rate too, right? I mean, not to mention the earth spins, our earth and the fundraising universe spins at such an alarming rate. But Jason, you're just talking about the conversation that you and I have, like you said, an inordinate amount of time doing this, because we're learning and we're gathering this so much information so quickly. You know what I mean? There's so much coming in, and it'd be a shame not to, you know, implement it and share it, you know what I mean? And have the conversation. So it's never ending, you know what I mean? Yeah. So that's all. I just want to piggyback on that.
Well, I'm going to ask you, Matt. So how did you manage that? How did you know, keep that part going where you didn't feel like you're, you know, and maybe you did. I mean, maybe it's just a constant balance. Well, I feel like I'm doing too much. I'm kind of falling behind. I'm having to work that. How did you manage that practically?
Yeah, like you said, it's a balance, and it's a long-term approach. You're not going to, you know, do it all at once. But just building that over time and setting kind of those, you know, those practices and procedures, getting those in place. And this is kind of how we do things. We had a workshop once a year where we brought kind of our leadership from within the state that I worked in. And it was, I mean, it was, they paid their own way to come, and we had a big turnout, and they came, and we spent a weekend kind of doing, you know, training and whatnot. And then they would take back that information back to their committees. But like I said, we did webinars like we're doing today amongst, and made those available to volunteers in the evenings, and a lot of one-on-one calls, I guess, is kind of how we accomplish that. But like you said, you never get to where you'd love to be, but it's just to kind of keep swinging the hammer, I guess, and trying to train as much as you can.
Perfect. Yeah, it's constant. Yeah, that's good.
Well, I just want Beverly I kind of made a comment about did anybody ever have any doing this, and Beverly said, we discussed the importance of this, but we found it difficult finding someone to fill the role, recruiting the volunteers. Only one of our committee chairs has accomplished this task. I've always got something to say, but I'd like to hear you respond to that, Matt.
Yeah.
So I'll dive into this. And the next topic I was going to bring up is we decided it was great to assign one person to focus on this role, kind of the recruitment and retention role within the committee. And, you know, it depended, we would put a lot of ownership on that role because it's extremely important on that training. And sometimes the people that probably been around longer than anyone, they might not be the right, you know, person to put in that role who's attracting future people that you want to join your committee. So picking that person is important. And I think I'm addressing the question. What I wanted to add on to that was, it was a huge thing for us when we would attract someone to come join our committee to check us out. That person, if they walked in and they're, you know, jumping into a committee or volunteer setting, that there's a lot of moving parts that go into it. It can be a little intimidating for that person to get started. So we always had that role, the volunteer recruitment role, as to be a mentor for those new people that walked into your committee, kind of put them under their wing for a little bit, follow up with those individuals, because it's pretty easy for people to kind of, you know, dip their toes into your volunteer group and just kind of fade into the background if you don't have someone following up to them or offering, their time as a resource to answer any questions, following up with them, before the next meeting. Hey, need a ride, need me to, are you going to make it? Things like that. And we found that to be incredibly helpful. But yeah, I do feel your pain. It's finding that right person to fit that role is hard. And sometimes it's you as a leader, and sometimes, within your organization, sometimes you have the right person has the knowledge that can kind of take on that role and really focus on that. And they might deprioritize other things in their role to take that on. And in the long run, that training will probably lift your overall, volunteer base up if they deprioritize other things.
Got a good question from Becky. Matt, can you see that?
Can.
Okay,
Becky's,
I'll just read it out. It's cool. Becky said she had a similar question. Any tips on how to put together the sales pitch to recruit new committee members, particularly for less enticing committees in procurement? So I'll while you're kind of digesting that, let me kind of tell you some stuff on both of those things. One of the things that I found really interesting with organizations that did really well with their committees, that were able to get people in, get them engaged, is they did things. It became kind of they kind of tied a social piece to it.
Mm-hmm.
And where you didn't just, well, you're on the committee, we're going to have a committee meeting, it's going to be at 3:00 on Tuesday, everybody show up. Okay, we're here for the committee meeting. Okay, well, yep, all right, well, you guys have your stuff now, let's get out of here. And it just was kind of, I mean, we've all been a part of those committee meetings. They're not necessarily it's I'd rather watch paint dry.
It's Charlie Brown's teacher.
Where they put a social aspect to it, and this takes a little planning. But you don't have to have a full-on event either. We're talking about, maybe somebody hosts at their house and says, hey, we're going to get the committee together over there and on Wednesday afternoon, I hope you can make it. And they have a deal in the afternoon, they maybe have some wine, or maybe somebody does something that they're having the event. And then everybody talks about it and says, oh my gosh, we had such a great time at the Ashleys for our committee meeting.
Yeah.
And somebody starts talking about, well, where were you guys at last night? Oh, well, we were on this committee for this fundraiser. Really? Oh yeah, we were over at the Ashley's house. Oh, well, I know Matt and Kirsty.
Yeah, you got it.
Kirsten.
Yep.
I've messed it up so many times, so I'm surprised.
Say it, Matt. Say it so we have it.
No, that's Kirsten, and she goes by Kirsten. Yeah. You hit them both.
All right, cool.
So, but the ones that I've seen that have had really successful, that have grown and done really well, is they put that piece of it in there. There was this social club mentality, like, I don't want to miss out. I wanted to do something. Yeah. And those are some things that I saw that the recruitment came out of. That's how you get people. People want to be a part of something fun.
And we're raising money for this really cool cause.
They want to be, they don't want to miss it out. And they want, to feel like that, because
I've seen that happen in real time, overtime as well.
Yeah. There was another group and committee, the way they got together, there was a certain restaurant, they got together at the same place, the same time. And then, they moved from the restaurant. They actually went from there. They moved over to a lawyer's place, because one of the guys on the committee was part of a law firm, and they would meet in the deal. The time was, and when you walked in the door, the attorney who was on the committee, he had the beverages set up. Mm-hmm. Everybody was ready, pour a cocktail, sit down. We had the agenda, and they went through everything. And boy, it became that thing, because it was fun to be a part of. Because
that's cool.
He was fun. He and the other people were fun. So,
yep. Okay. Call in option. Yeah, that makes sense, Becky. Well, I wanted to say something real quick, Becky, is that, explaining the less enticing committee like procurement, explaining and completely shifting the impression about how important it is. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Stressing. And then go ahead, Jay. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, why does it have to have a Zoom option? I'm just saying.
That's a good question. As far as just really, like it's mandatory that we're in
all
person.
The time. We're using it right now. I mean, we're a decentralized company, so we have our social times a little differently within our organization, because we've got people in 7 states now. It is difficult, but if you're in a community, especially with community fundraising, it's okay to have those things, because guess what? The person that was going to Zoom in, they'll be ticked that they missed, because You know, they didn't know Trevor was going to make some world, he didn't ask him, but Trevor made his world famous lasagna. And holy cow, we got to have lasagna, and he broke out a bottle of wine. And the next thing you know, we kind of had a little impromptu party, and we got
somebody missed out. Yeah, you missed out.
I just, these are just ideas. I'm just throwing stuff out there.
Yeah.
Matt, I would love to hear your
and
take
Becky,
on that as well.
Expand on that question. Sorry to interrupt, but Becky, I mean, is it possible? Can we make it mandatory to have folks in person, or are you dealing with so many committee members all over the country and stuff like that? Anyway, go ahead, Matt.
No, Jason, I think both you and Trevor, you're spot on that. And that's kind of going back to that, organization. As long as you're organized and get through those meetings efficiently, you have that time set aside to socialize, and it's not getting too late into people's evenings. Kind of jumping back to Becky's question a little bit ago, how to get those people motivated to jump into those, difficult roles, or maybe the not so fun roles. Kind of tagging on to what you said, Trevor, I think explaining, for the mission, what's that doing for the mission, and how important that is really to the organization. It might not be the most glamorous role. This is really what we need to accomplish to accomplish our goals and ultimately get back to whatever we're working towards. So I think that's part of definitely the sales pitch, Becky, is just, framing that to what's being accomplished because of those. Maybe it's reaching out for donations, I'm guessing, or she mentioned procurement. Yeah. That's one of those roles, and it's probably, you're going to have some people that's just not their thing. That's just, I guess going back to training, if people are confident, they're a lot more willing to go do that. You can give them some tools and give them some sales pitches where they will be more open to do that. Some people just never get comfortable with that. So probably putting people in the right roles,
the right characters,
their thing. But this group of people, hey, you're the door knockers, you're getting out and getting donations for our organization. And these couple of people, that's not their thing, and they're not willing to do it. Let's focus on, or maybe you guys want to reach out, electronically. You're not comfortable talking to people in person, but like I mentioned, that one volunteer he worked for an oil company, and he was in Kazakhstan, and he was getting lots of donations for us, overseas, so right locally where that group was from. So
that's crazy.
Yeah,
that's
Becky, I would leave you with this.
I was going to say, Jake, you want to rip the Band-Aid off?
Well, you don't have to use every meeting. Zoom is a great tool, and you want to make it convenience. Maybe you do it once a month. Maybe you do it every other week. Maybe you do it something like this where make it to where, it's a really kicking thing, and nobody wants to do it by Zoom, because if you got to do it by Zoom, you kind of suck, because you get to miss out on the fun. But those options are things that you got to do, and there's no hard and fast rule. But I think that, in my experience, my opinion doesn't mean anything. My experience is the organization's doing like what Bev talked about. They meet for a certain time, they have a glass of wine. It's not a full-on party. They're not doing a full-on hors d'oeuvre. Somebody, it's Jason's time to bring the wine, and I, bring a bottle of whatever, we pass it around, we're done, and out the door. I mean, those are just things, and every organization has its own culture of what you want to do. Maybe you need to remake the culture. Maybe it's all, everybody sits around a board, at the office of the nonprofit, and sits around in the boardroom and, scowls at each other, and this is just, I don't want to be here. Well, we didn't have any coffee here. I don't know. I mean, but I do think you got to make it fun. I think there's got to be some kind of where people are going to enjoy it.
There has to be a draw
around people,
Well, we're talking about people. We talk about this all the time with getting folks to events. It's got to be fun. It's got to be something that they want to do, right? So there's a lot of symmetry here. I think it's cool. Anne brought up a really cool point about what she did to get folks excited about making the commitment to be on a committee, and that's awesome. That's really, really fun. Yeah. So Anna did a new fundraiser, a new raffle, and went to bought a table at a local raffle in the area, invited people that they wanted to recruit to be on their committee to attend, with the committee chair and the organization executive director. And they have a full committee who are excited about making ours even more successful than the ones they attend. Yeah. I mean, hey, I'm competitive. I think you can look at it that way. It's like, hey, they did it. I think I can do it better, or what have you, and listen, it's not like, I don't know. There's all sorts of cool ideas that come out, but most things have been done, right? So you're not, stealing anyone's IP, so to speak, you know what I mean, by copying what's successful. A lot of times when that happens, you have a roadmap. Then you can sprinkle your own additives in there and make it your own and make it better if you want, or be inspired to make it better and be competitive about that. I'm using that term loosely, but yeah, I think that's fantastic. Good on you, Ann. Good on you. Yeah. And there's, success is obvious. You can see it, it's like people sometimes they finish first and they cross they put their hands in the air, but everyone knows because they crossed the line first. Do you know what I mean?
And I think too, just because you try something one time and it doesn't work,
for sure.
It's kind of like going to the gym one time and you're still out of shape. My pants are still too tight.
Yeah.
Well, that didn't work. I'm not going to go anymore.
Yeah.
It takes time.
Yeah. Be consistent, be patient with yourself.
It just takes time. And these things it's, constant pressure doesn't mean high pressure, just constant pressure over time moves mountains. And that's the thing you got to keep in mind when we're doing this, because it's like we were talking about training and all this stuff, recruiting volunteers. It's kind of the thing that never ends. I mean, it's a marathon. It just keeps going on, and you're thinking, is it the finish line ever? No, it's not.
But once you adopt that mindset, though, it makes it a lot easier, right? To adhere to that it's just a rule of life. It has to be constantly moving. That's cool. Yeah. Good stuff.
Matt,
thanks for sharing, Ann.
Let's get to these next couple of points.
We got 2 more left.
Really good.
Yeah. And keep the questions coming.
Yeah, please do. Next one I had was provide consistent feedback. Really important just to let your volunteer group, whether you're a volunteer yourself or you're paid staff, let them know how they're doing, and give them ideas on where they can improve. It keeps volunteers motivated. You want to be really cautious about this on the constructive criticism. Just on the delivery, you always want to make sure it's, of course, just respectful and delivered in the right manner. Oftentimes it's better to kind of give that criticism in one-on-ones and someone pulled aside instead of calling someone out. You just want to use your emotional intelligence, I guess, when you're going through giving this criticism. I always thought that was important, of just knowing how people react within your committees. So you do it the right way. You're not putting someone kind of on the spot and making them embarrassed amongst their peers. I always like kind of the compliment sandwich of kind of delivering some positive news, with the constructive criticism following, and then kind of ending with the positive or positives for the future. I always thought that was just simple.
I don't know why I love that one. Bread, meat, bread. Yep.
That's right. I love it. Always thought that worked well, but just letting people know how they're doing and what they're accomplishing, that's good, and what they're missing, those marks they're missing is important. The next one I had here was create a positive volunteer experience, and we kind of hit that one pretty good already. It's incredibly important. Those volunteer groups that I dealt with that had a good time, enjoyed each other's company, were efficient in their meetings, and set that time aside to enjoy each other, or like you mentioned, Jason, maybe have a drink together. Or pretty soon the committee's there 2 hours after they've gone through business and they're having a good time and having fun. Then it's not just a monotonous job for them. It's really a social gathering and time to have fun amongst one another. Really big believer in that. On this topic too, it's up to you as a leader within your organization or amongst your volunteers to keep that positive attitude amongst your committees. That positive attitude, or negative attitude probably worse, is just infectious in a volunteer setting. And no matter how your day went, or maybe someone else's day didn't go well in their personal life or career, you got to kind of turn that frown upside down. And when you're in that committee setting, and be upbeat and have fun, because it's just going to spread like wildfire. And if someone, you're having a bad day and you take it out on someone, or it's just, you don't come across as being, things being fun, it's just not a good recipe for success, or leaving that impression with maybe new volunteers that are there for the first day and don't know your normal attitude. Just really important to be upbeat and be a leader in that effect.
Love that.
The other thing I had here is just to make sure your committees are kind of open and welcoming to new ideas and new volunteers, and be aware, or beware, I guess, of, we've always done it this way, that kind of mentality, or we tried that 15 years ago and it didn't work, because maybe there's a better way. And I've often seen volunteers step in to a committee, with a committee members that have been there for a long time. to volunteers that have this this knowledge base in a way they think things are made to work. And when a new volunteer pitches an idea and it's shot down immediately for those two reasons I mentioned, it just really demoralizes that new person joining your committee. And I've seen great people that stepped away from the committee because they thought their voice wasn't being heard.
Yeah.
Or they weren't, man, I'm never going to make an impact here. They don't want to try anything, or even they're not open to it. So be cautious with that. Sometimes the ideas that are put out there, there's a reason why you don't want to try them, but you got to hear them out and be open to them, or have a good reasoning why they don't work, not just because we tried it or this is how we do things.
I was going to say that's something I think is so important. You can tell somebody, we've got some experience with that. That is a great idea. Yeah. And we did try this once before, but here's what happened. And that way you're letting them know, yeah, it's a good idea. You're going through it. Here's what our experience was with it. And this is why we're this is what happened before, and probably why we're skittish of it, or we don't want to, we don't have a lot of confidence in it. And that's really helpful because you're going, oh, okay, that's a good point. And they're not missing something, because like you said, you walk into a committee, hey, have you guys ever thought about this? Yeah, that sucked. That was just a terrible idea. Next time we're going to hire somebody, that guy's terrible. We hired old Ledlow to be the auctioneer, and he sucked, that kind of,
well, be kind. Come on, right? This is the thing. Be kind. I think.
Well, I'm not
being open-minded about stuff.
It may not be quite that bad, but sometimes, even though it's not intended that way, that's how it's received.
People have character. Yeah.
That's how it's received.
Some of these characters can be a little, bristly.
Talk about this last one. This is a pretty good one here.
Yeah.
This is important. As a big believer in recognition and appreciation. Volunteers that feel appreciated and their time's valued, and you appreciate their efforts, they're going to be bigger supporters of you as a leader amongst your organization.
Yep.
And work harder for the organization. They feel like they're being valued and appreciated. So it's important to kind of recognize those volunteers. And it kind of goes back to what I mentioned, emotional intelligence, knowing your group. Because sometimes it's appropriate to recognize, those goals and accomplish, publicly amongst your committee. Other times it's more appropriate, just to really, one-on-one, a sincere thank you.
Yeah.
As long as it's sincere, you're not faking. People can read through that pretty quickly.
Big time, especially these days, for sure.
Big time. I was always a proponent of, thank you notes, small gifts for individuals, thoughtful gifts, tokens of appreciation, buying someone dinner, as simple as that, or taking them out to dinner after a meeting. It's not a lot, doesn't cost you a lot or the organization a lot. And it just goes a long way to building relationships, and just showing people that you care about them and what they're doing.
Never a bad time to be gracious, brother.
No doubt.
There's never a bad time to be gracious. That's for sure. And we do, I say this all the time. It's like, if it occurs to you, if you think about it, stop right then and do it. You know what I mean? If it's a text message, a phone call, a thank you card, a cup of coffee, a meal, like you said, if those ideas come, hop on it right then. You know what I mean? And exercise that and twist the dial. And if they don't, then we have to work on disciplining into being more proactive with that graciousness and that thank you. Just a simple thank you, right? I think it's huge.
You bet.
There's also an underlying theme, everything you're talking about and everything that you good, bad, or indifferent along this process. In these settings, we're working towards something that's bigger than the individual. And so you can always use that as well as like, oh my goodness, look what we were able to accomplish. And we couldn't have done it without you.
Yeah, that was kind of my bonus one, and it probably
supersedes,
no, you're good. You're good transition. Yeah. It probably supersedes all these other 7. Is really, conveying to your volunteer group what are we here for? What is the mission? What's being accomplished, and helping them understand that simple pitch of what you are doing. I've seen a lot of volunteers that get involved and you'd ask them, why are we here? And they didn't have just they kind of knew what the organization did, but they didn't know, those individual projects that your organization was accomplishing. They couldn't reiterate quickly, what the organization did and why it's making a difference, to make the world a better place. So really, I love to every meeting that I was able to attend as a staff, give a quick, update of, current events of what's happening, or what's happened recently, what the organization is working on. So you had that tangible, knowledge passed to the volunteers of, man, we're here for a bigger purpose than ourselves, and this is what our time and all of our efforts are helping change and make things better.
Super cool. Can't do that enough. We call them mission.
Guys, we got just a few minutes before we wrap this up. With any more questions for Matt? Maybe there's something. So good. I've got a question. I'm still trying to figure out how I'm going to do it. I'm going to draw a winner here in just a second. Actually, I've got the draw. We're going to announce it. We've got a winner. So
great feedback, Becky. And I can't help but to always come back to, Becky, you've got such a beautiful mission, and everyone knows that, and yeah, of course. And you can never do that enough, correct, Matt? I mean, both of you gentlemen, you can never do that enough.
I think that's so important, because how many times do we talk to somebody and that whole, that's how they get that feedback back. That's how, that's the return they're going to get. Yeah. Just like we talked about, if you make a monetary donation, what you're going to get back is satisfaction, knowing that you were part of that mission, that happened. Yeah. Yeah. And doing that with your volunteers is just as important, because that's what they're going to get. The appreciation, gratitude.
It's big, man.
They're going to be able to, putting it on their resume kind of thing. But that's really where the deal comes back, is they know that this time was valuably invested, that they invested created a great return. That's a big deal.
Yeah. And we were talking about just, doing that often. It's never a bad thing. I mean, you got folks that are just like, always take down the notes, and this is the impact, and the comma goes here. And that was from the last meeting. You got guys like me that pinball in the brain, and I need to be reminded of what the score is, and that's good. You know what I mean? There's never a bad time. I think that's awesome. I think it's really cool.
A question that, volunteers will get from potential donors or supporters, or what are you doing for me now? What's the organization doing for me now? Yep. So like you said, this can't be brought up enough. And,
being well-versed. Yep.
Being well-versed. Yep. Yeah. If volunteers can articulate what's going on with the organization or what's being done, it's just.
And we believe in the symmetry of that message. Everyone's saying the same thing. Obviously Jason brought up this beautiful, or developed this beautiful thing. It's like, this is what we've done. This is what we're doing. And this is what we plan on doing with the money that we're raising at the event. You know what I mean? That kind of, and just keeping it that triumvirate of just, this is, once again, what we've done, what we're doing, this is what we plan on doing, this is where the money's going,
Awesome.
And that's just a really cool story. That's just a really cool story, or can be, so.
It can be yours.
I love it.
Ready to draw a winner?
Good.
I got the winner. I got it.
Really good. Yeah. Okay.
Alicia Bouchard. Everybody give her Alicia.
All right.
Thank you so much for being here, Alicia.
Thank you so much.
You just got a trip that you'll be able to use to go raise more money at your next event.
And we hope that warms you up. We hope that warms you up and warms your soul up there in cold Minnesota when you have that spring snowstorm coming through. To go full circle.
Well, hey, Matt, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you all for being here. Yeah. Again, if you would like to reach out, Matt at hgafundraising.com, Jason at hgafundraising.com, Trevor at hgafundraising.com, hgafundraising.com, period. You can go there.
Yeah.
If you got anything good out of this, please, the only thing we ask is that you
thank you,
a simple fee. Please just share. Just share this. Share this with other folks that you know or something. That's the way we get this information out. So,
Becky, don't give me the bad news. They're playing the Giants right now. I don't have it on right now. Don't give me the bad news, Becky. Hey, who are y'all playing? I don't know who y'all are playing, Becky, but yeah, that's awesome. Safeco's such a fun place to watch a football game. Y'all are playing the Guardians. Okay, great. Well, fun. Yeah, that's so great. Well, enjoy opening day. It is a beautiful time of year, that's for sure. So, and Matt, can't thank you enough, brother. Gold, fantastic. All right. We'll be sharing that the document with all those wonderful steps that Matt curated himself with so much experience, and hopefully it adds a lot of value to everyone with what you're going through with your committees and volunteers and all that good stuff. And don't hesitate to reach out to Matt. Matt is a part of our team. Matt at hgafundraising.com. Like Jason said, please reach out to with any questions. And he's happy to help. So very, very cool. All right. Thanks, everybody. Episode 108 next week. So have a great Thursday and a great weekend. All right. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate you, brother. Thanks, Jay.